So, hello everyone again. Today I'm looking forward to taking you through a watercolor painting demonstration and our painting project for January and this majestic Eilian Dunan, hopefully I've pronounced that okay, castle in Scotland. Apologies for anyone that knows more than I do about the pronunciation. Eileen Dunan will be working from this reference photo that shows the castle on, and we discussed this on Pat Chat the other day. The image, the scene we've got is an overcast day, yet it's bright. It's probably in the summer because we can tell with the leaves on the trees. Bright skies, creating a nice contrast against the dark stonework of the taller building of the castle here. As always, of course, I take one of your images from monthly projects, and thanks to Patreon member Janet for the kind sharing of this photo for this project. Since it's low tide, and if you've done any research on Google, you'll see a lot of images of this scene where it's high tide, you get all these fantastic reflections of the island. We're here low tide. There's lots of textured rocks here exposed in the foreground that I think will allow us to have a little bit of fun with different watercolor techniques. I was thinking about this sort of white crusty stuff. How can we, I'm not sure what this white stuff is here. Maybe it's limpets or something, some staining on the rocks there, but how can we depict that? And you've got these several layers on these rocks. White, then it gets like a warmish color, then there's a darker bluey slatish color, then it gets a little bit lighter. Then we've got the seaweed as well. There's another dimension to the scene, that the calm sea on the left hand side, gradually transferring as it comes into shallow water with the seaweed. And to me what looks like seaweed that's sort of floating on the surface like kelp or something like that. How can we depict that in watercolor? We've got the distant hills in the photo, and as often happens with photos, they can appear, things in the distance can appear quite vivid and the color can be quite saturated. And if we did the same with painting, that would bring it too far forward. I mean, if you look at the green of the distant hills there, the other side of the coast, the other side of the loch, that green is almost a similar green and value to the shrubs to the left of the castle on this island. We want to try and push that back a little bit, so less vivid and a bit lighter in color. And what we've got here with Janet's photo, with Janet's image, what we've got here is a really nice composition. We've got the foreground rocks, we've got the middle ground of the castle sat on its island, we've got the distant hills as well. We've got a nice composition to start with. Now, my objectives with this painting is to help you, particularly those people at a beginner level, help you more with your confidence in using different watercolor techniques, using strong values. All right, look at the light, look at the darkness, trying to play on those values. We think the light is coming from the top right corner, so yet it's an overcast bright day, but the brightness, the light is coming from that top right corner. So I want to cover those different watercolor techniques, exploiting these contrasts, maybe pushing the color a little bit, and experimenting with textures, for example, on the foreground rocks. So I'm going to take you through my complete process, start to finish, and I'll try and explain things as best I can with some commentary along the way. All right. So there may be some pauses in the process where I'm in deep thought, trying to think what to do next. So apologies in advance, but I'll try and give as much commentary as I go along here. And those of you on here live, of course, if you've got any questions, I'll keep looking up to the screen on my left just to see if there's any questions when I get to a relevant place when I can pause and try and answer your questions. All right, let me describe my materials to you. As always for me, I use and recommend Saunders Waterford watercolor paper. It's best to always stick with a brand you know rather than keep swapping and changing. So I prefer Saunders Waterford. This is 300 grams. It's 140 pounds, 15 inches by 11 inches. Paints are from Mark Jackman in the UK, and oh, there's that fly. Mark Jackman in the UK, and my normal palette of colours, as always, very rarely changes. Neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, a few opaquish colours down here. I've got a lavender, I've got a Naples yellow light, and a white gouache bottom right corner. Hopefully you can see that down in the bottom right corner. 2 or 3 mixing wells, my water and my sponge are the right hand side. Brushes wise, I'm using these 2 brushes quite a lot at the moment. Mainly this Tintoretto mop brush, which are very affordable and very durable as well. I'm not affiliated to Tintoretto at all, but just like their brushes. So this is the Tintoretto 1407 mop brush, synthetic brush, good mop brush, and with a fairly good, I'll try and just adjust that, it's a fairly good point to it, and edge as well, and then a flat brush as well. We're using that at some stages, and a few other synthetic brushes as well. Right, let me just walk you through the scene. So Eileen Dunnan Castle, very famous castle. You would have seen it on countless films, movies over the years. We have this rebuilt castle. I think it's only been rebuilt the last 120 years or so. And these buildings on this island in this lock. This lock is open to the sea, so this is a tidal lock. A connecting bridge. It's actually quite a long bridge, but we've got a few arches there as well. It's low tide. We've got some exposed rocks here. I've described the different tiers that we've got as well. On the far island, we can see different tiers as well. We've got the greenery of the slopes just below the buildings, and then we've got a sort of rocky layer, and then seaweed. I guess high tide is going to be around about there, something like that. The lot beyond it, and the distant hills. We've got some trees over the right hand side, some figures milling around as well. Yeah, so a lovely scene for watercolor. Right, let me just check and see if there's any questions before I start. I'll start with a drawing as normal. Incidentally, Patreon, as regards Patreon, with this project, now you may want to follow me exactly, but I'd encourage you to do your own thing. And I know a number of you on Patreon, you like using different watercolor techniques, and some of you like doing this in line and wash as well. So I encourage you to do whatever you feel fit, really. You do your own thing. Right, now, so drawing, I'm going to be using an HB pencil, and this has got a 0.9 millimeter diameter lead. So just run through the composition briefly again. It's pretty much there. We discussed on Pat Chat, our regular online Zoom calls, the possibility of moving that castle just a little bit to the right, and thereby giving us a little bit more sea to play with. So move that a bit more right, possibly further up to the top right corner. Less arches maybe as well, simplify that. but opening out the sea a little bit more, and I think I will go with that. We also discussed with the sea possibility of putting other things in there, boats. Someone suggested a Loch Ness monster. I don't think the Loch Ness monster gets this far, but you might want to put in other animals, herons, seagulls, seals, whatever you want to. Right, I'm going to keep it simple, as per Janet's lovely photo. So our castle is going to be up there. Let me just get in starting from the left hand side, I'm getting in the edge of the far hills, and then we come down to the lower. If I can call this the lower building, the higher building, a connecting building, and the bridge. Okay, of course they will have proper names, I'm sure, but for the purpose of this demo, let me describe them as that. So that's my lower building, the connection of the two, and the taller building. Try and get the verticals right in parallel to the side of my paper. So having got the edge of those objects, the edge of those buildings correct, I'll now start to add in a little bit more detailed chimneys, for example, to the chimneys either end of the buildings. The edges of the rooftops have got a sort of stepped design, rather like you have in the Low Countries, Belgium and Holland. I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to keep it nice and simple. This connecting building has got a higher level there, and it's got a lower level here. And that lower level, that's the right-hand side. We've got greenery here. Around the base of the castle, there's a walkway where we see all the people, and it slopes down a little bit, and then to a dip, and then it goes up to the bridge. Less arches in there. Back to the left-hand side of the island, and some shrubby type things going on to the left of the buildings, down to the shoreline. Now this shoreline is very difficult to see. Very difficult to see there exactly where the water is. I'd imagine it's just if you're able to walk over from here to there, be all sort of mushy. You need your Wellington boots, it'll be sort of mushy seaweed. Difficult to see the waterline. We see it there. See there, there's quite light there. I'm not sure what this lighter stuff is. Is it foam or water? But we can see the water's edge there, and becomes less obvious as we go over. But try and keep it horizontal, I would say. Over to the bridge area. Now the bridge, we're just going to have one or two arches in, keep it dead simple. Right, so one arch there. And then we've got that sort of central support and another arch there. Right hand side, there's a light rock coming down. Then we have a patch of greenery, and then a less smooth rock in the middle, in the foreground. And this is the one that's got this sort of whitish cap to it. So that's white. Then it gets into a darker tier. And then we get, as it comes lower down, we get the seaweed cropping in. So I guess maybe this is all covered when the tide comes in, or at least to that level there. Anyway, in this rock, there's lots of these sort of veins and cracks that I will paint. I'm not going to put too much detail in there because I want the focus to be on the castle. I want that to be the focus, and particularly this area here: dark, light sky, dark building. All right, and then less so down here. But maybe with these lines, maybe with the shape of this rock, we can sort of help direct the viewer up to the buildings, up to the castle. Back to the sea on the lock on the left-hand side, and trying to get in now the shoreline, trying to think where that will be. It is using a reference point. It is just, so we've got the bottom of that building, and then a little bit lower down, it's sort of there, isn't it? Above where the rocks start on the island. So let's make it around about there. And make a line as horizontal as I can. You could use a ruler if you want to. If you want to assist, get a nice straight line in there. It's a good straight edge there. But a horizontal line. Nearly there. Back to the building. Back to the building and just put in a few more details of this building. Not bothered putting in the windows. There's an archway here. But we want that. That's the wall of the walkway going around. We've got the trees just beyond. On the right-hand side of the island, there's some trees that are creating a little bit of darkness against the light of some of the figures on there. This is light. This is dark in there. Dark in there. So I'm using this cross-hatching to just try and serve as a visual reminder where those darks will be. I think I'm nearly there actually with regards to the drawing. Getting in the main objects, getting the composition right, trying to imagine the composition, putting that castle not in the middle, moving it off to the right, and then getting a balance of things on the left-hand side. The rocks, you don't need to copy the photo. You can make things up and make these cracks where you want to, and make the direction of cracks where you want to suit the composition. Okay, let's just see if there's any questions then before I dive into starting to do some painting. Oh, looks like Helen's going to put in Nessie. Um, yeah, you can put any sea creatures in there you want. I think maybe some seals might be more appropriate, or some, if you've got quite a large sky, if your horizon is a little bit lower than mine, maybe you could put some seagulls in there, some seabirds. Painting then. Oh, Ronald's asking paper size. This is 15 inches by 11 inches. Let me just pop that as a question. There we go. Yeah. You got that, Ronald? Okay. Let's do some painting. Light, of course, with watercolor, it's light to dark. And I will start with the sky, gradually work my way down. The first phase will be to cover pretty much the whole scene. I want to try and keep this area light, a little bit dark in the sky over here, try and have this sort of atmospheric sky. We've got this, I suppose this is typical summer weather in Scotland, on that side of the coast, where you get these Atlantic weather systems coming in, and these clouds as well, this sort of high cloud, and a fairly typical summer's day. Right, dip my mop brush into some clear water and all over this right hand side top right corner. Now as we go over, I'm going to introduce a weak wash of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, or it could be burnt umber actually, burnt umber, and just have different intensities. Notice the way I'm using my brush, just almost stabbing the paper. I'm not doing a traditional wash like that, linear wash coming down. I'm really, excuse me, I'm really just attempting to cover the whole of the scene with this mark technique, and just I'm going to introduce a little bit more blue into the scene. There we are, preserving the light around that area there. Continue on down, just covering the whole scene with something that's light on the horizon there. Now, as I come down to the water's edge here, I want that to be light, and then we'll gradually get darker as we come towards us, all right? So we'll start off with something light. And then go a little bit darker as we come down. Ultramarine blue, burnt umber or burnt sienna, basically a blue and a brown, okay? Cover the whole scene, even the bits that are going to go that crusty white colour. Again, like the sky, my brush marks are fairly sort of haphazard in direction, but we'll need this for the texture of those rocks. This is just to cover up the paper, just to take the white away from the paper. The white of the paper, take it away. Cover it all up. And that is pretty much it for the first phase. Now, where I am right now is it is quite cool and humid. This is going to take a long time to dry, so I'm going to speed up things. I'm going to speed up things with a hairdryer. So excuse the noise if it does come. The microphone should mute itself when we get a loudish thing like a hairdryer going. So sorry for this. Yes, I needed to use the hairdryer, otherwise I'd have been around here for at least 5-10 minutes waiting for that to dry. My wash needed to dry 100%. It could stay a little bit more moist down the bottom here, because by the time I come down here, this would have dried naturally. But my next step is to paint the background hills in, and then the building. We're gradually coming down top to bottom, okay? Adding in those darks. So my next step, for me, is going to be the distant hills. As I said in the intro, back to the photo. These hills, they in the photo, they appear quite dark, quite green. If you zoom into the photo, you'll see a little bit of coolness up there, and that's what I want. That's the effect up there. If you zoom in the photo, if you zoom in there, that is quite blue, almost like to me, like a dark cobalt blue. That's the kind of effect I want to have. Cool, lighter in value, push it back. Not that vivid green. Okay. I'll mix up something here. So cobalt blue, a little bit of ridging green, which is a cool green, and my burnt sienna. Really, those three. Let's do a little bit of a test up here. The actual ridge, the actual skyline, will have trees on it, so maybe we could just hint at those with the brush. Just, do you see what I'm doing? Just sort of flicking it up. They could be the tops of conifers or pine trees or something like that. And this is almost a third mix of all these three colours. So a third of ridging green, a third of burnt sienna, a third of cobalt blue, that sort of effect. And we're getting, as we're coming down, again, I'm using this sort of stabbing technique. We're getting the subtle lights and darks appearing, which you will see in the photo. A little bit of, it's not too, what I'm trying to say is not too flat, okay, not the same sort of value over that whole area. It's quite a large area, and we want to try and make it fairly interesting. Cobalt blue, ridging green, burnt sienna. You could almost mix it on the paper, pick up the viridian green. Maybe a little bit of cobalt blue where I saw that blue. If you've used a pencil line to define the skyline, it'd be good practice to go up to that pencil line and maybe beyond it, so that you don't have a pencil line showing on the sky area. Just sometimes looks a little bit untidy. Coming down to the shoreline and going over the edge of the buildings there, because that building there will be quite dark. The light's coming from the top right corner. That's going to be dark. That'll be lighter. Dark, lighter. As I come down to the shoreline on the far side of the lock, I'll go a little bit more intense with these colours and darker, all right, darker, down to the water's edge. And now it doesn't need to be a perfect straight line. You can make it a little bit more sort of organic. Again, I might need to just go up to that pencil line like I did with the skyline. Bit of this viridian green again. Up to the building, up to the left-hand side of the island. In fact, there's a little, I pointed out on Pat Chat the other day, there's this little, again, when you zoom into the photo, there's like a little meadow nestling in the valley there. That might be quite nice to suggest. So I've covered up that area. Perhaps I could lift off with a damp synthetic brush, just lift off a little bit of that distant valley floor there, just to suggest that little bit of grass or meadowland over there. I think that's it as regards the distant hills there. Keep them simple, not too much detail. It's the background, okay? There is a little bit of glare here, a little bit of shine, that because of my lighting, that will gradually go away as that dries. Okay, over to the buildings then. And this is where we can now start to think about more of the values, getting a little bit darker in value, particularly up there, taller building, left-hand side. We need to also, if you look closely, there's a lot of sort of vertical stains coming down these walls. Perhaps as we progress with the painting, maybe with some sort of brush, we could define those sort of vertical stains coming down the building, just giving that sort of aged, battered look. It's taking all these weather systems for the Atlantic, 365 days of the year. It's gonna take a fair old battering, and then we've got these windows as well as a final bit of detail. All right. Colour for the castle. It's a mixture of cools and warms, I would say. Mixture of yellow ochre, burnt sienna, some blues to make it cooler. All right, so I'm going to try and think about that combination. And let's start with the left-hand side here, and I'll work my way gradually over. Just use my tissue to dry up that area there where it's come over the building. I want that to be a hard edge. I want that to be dry as I go in with the paint there. I'm sticking with my mop brush. Stick with a brush that's as big as you can manage and yet gives you a good point or a good edge. So a combination of those colors I've mentioned, and now I'm holding my brush a little bit more precisely now. And let's start with the chimney. And we've got the roof. Again, you've drawn the outline of the building, go up to that pencil line. There's my hard edge, left-hand edge there. Stopping short of where it's going to transition into the greenery. We've got the connecting building now. There might be a few little ramparts here. And a little gap there, a little horizontal line left unpainted. That's going to be the top. I think there's a bit of a terrace there or something like that on that lower side. Top left corner now of the taller building. This is going to be quite dark, so I'm actually picking up a bit of neutral tint here, which is a dark charcoaly grey, and well, it's very dark, a bit like Payne's grey in a way. And again, start with that chimney. The side of the building. And then coming down that's that left-hand side. The right-hand side can be a little bit lighter. A little bit warmer as well, a bit of yellow ochre, perhaps a bit of cadmium orange. Then try right-hand side, try and get that straight edge parallel as well. Coming down to the greenery below. There we go. It doesn't matter if you leave little bits of paper unpainted, we can make that into something. In fact, there are. If you look closely on the building, there are these little I'm not sure what they are, these little sort of white lines and little boulders here and there that are quite light. Maybe they're covered in lichen or something like that. Next, a bit of greenery. We've got now the top sort of slopes of this island, and this is where we need to go a little bit more vivid with our greens. Now I've got a spring green here. I've got a spring green here, which is quite a nice green, and I will go in a little bit darker for some of the bushes. Leaving that light line there, that's the top of the wall, that's this sort of footpath going around the building. And this grassy area, it comes down to some rocks. The edge of the rocks is not a straight line. There's some rocky outcrops that are going into this grassy area. So again, we can just emphasize that a bit. Do you see that with the angle of these green bits? They kind of try and again maybe guide the viewer up to the castle. Now, right-hand side of the castle and the trees. The trees just above the bridge. They're actually on the right-hand side of the island, but they're beyond the bridge, and they too are creating a bit of contrast. I'm using viridian green and a burnt sienna or burnt umber just to get a darker green. And then come down to the top of the bridge is almost horizontal, certainly there, and it slopes down. It slopes down a little bit. Next, I'm going to do, so next, well, let me just see if there's any questions. Right, question from Mark. I wonder how you can best keep that light patch in the distant hillside. The distant hillside over here. Well, I guess going in, you could lift it off if you've gone too dark, if you mean there. Mark, that what you mean? That light patch, the distant hillside, or is it the actual meadowland? Well, I've done that little bit of lifting off there. I've resisted the temptation to go in with a green because that again will bring it too far forward. So hopefully that has answered your question there. Thanks very much, Mark. Next step for me will be the water near us. So keeping that light, there are some darker horizontal streaks coming down to the nearby rocks. So what I'm talking about here are these rocks here. So again, I'll use that same mop brush and some horizontal strokes, trying to define this sort of mushy area of seaweed, all sorts going on there. And then the seaweed becomes a little bit warmer here, but I think I'll cut around, I'll paint around the edge of these rocks, all right? And a colour for this will be ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, a little bit of viridian green. Don't worry too much. Maybe a little bit of cobalt green if you've got it. It's a sort of dark greeny colour. And now I've got to be very careful here to try and get in these horizontal lines. So I'm just starting from the left-hand side, dragging over, and these lines will be thicker and more solid as we come towards us. Can leave a few gaps here and there. Perhaps a little bit darker as they come towards us and they're hitting the rocks. We're coming into the area now between the island and the shore here, and I've got to fill in that area there. Now, as we come over to the right, it does change to more of a, you know, that colour of seaweed. It's sort of like a warmer colour, almost like a reddy brownish colour with a little bit of blue in it. So perhaps a bit of alizarin crimson. Bit of alizarin crimson in there. Bit of light red. That's too red. Go a little bit browner. I'm using burnt sienna as we go over to the bridge. There we are. I'll do next the foreground area here. And this is going to be this sort of, well, combination of rocks, seaweed. Looks like a sort of grassy area there. Maybe that's not covered with the water, but certainly this sort of slatish grey. And then the seaweed below that, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson. With my brush directions again, trying to hint at these lines, drawing the viewer into the scene. And more rocks. We've got a grassy area here. I'm using my spring green. If you don't have a spring green, then a bright yellow and a cobalt blue might be a good alternative. While the surface is damp, I'm going in with a thicker combination of the same colours, the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And then this right-hand side. That light boulder, that light rock. Very light on the top. Very light on the top and a little bit darker around the base. Now the very base of the island and going over to the bridge. A little bit more tricky this because we're sort of sandwiched between that green and the water there. So what have we got here? Well, we've got some lighter rocks, then it goes a little bit darker, then we've got that seaweed again. And not a straight edge where it meets with the water. So just a bit of observation here, just to spend, a few seconds, a minute or so, just looking at how you might do that in watercolor. I think it's going to be quite dark. Going to be quite dark at the shoreline. Using my fingers here to help with the merging of the green with this rock color. Over to the bridge and burnt sienna, bit of cobalt blue. Leave a bit of light at the top. Doesn't need to be too perfect, you could just break it up here and there. And now as we come down, go a little bit darker because we want that hard edge, that contrast between the light rock there and the darkness of the bridge. Down to the water's edge now, and we've got this seaweed occurring again. Alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, actually a bit of green in there as well, a bit of viridian green. Just pick up a bit of green there, because I think this is it's very difficult to find out what kind of vegetation we've got over there. All right, gradually taking shape now. I think I'll just make this top of this rock just a little bit darker. There we go. So while that bottom bit's drying, I can now go back into this if these buildings are dryish, I can go in now and add in a bit more texture to those buildings, just to define them a bit more, the architectural details, these vertical stains coming down the walls, give it a bit of character, and the windows as well. So actually, I might go to my flat brush at this stage. Right, a synthetic flat brush, it's not particularly wide. This is, well, it's 1/2 inch wide. All right, synthetic brush. And I'm just using this one mixing area in this painting, which is unusual for me. Normally I'm using all three. Right, let's try and darken up that roof. Then we've got the left-hand side of this building. Left-hand side of that building. Coming over. So my brush is, it's not too wet, not too dry, not too wet, it's sort of in the middle. Let's now go into this middle area here. Just picking up some dryish paint. And now back to my taller building and trying to just emphasize some of the values on this building. Roof of the taller building, let's make that a little bit darker as well. There's a sort of turret on the right-hand side. That's okay. Right, still with this flat brush, I want to define some of the shrubs on the island. And darker green, not too much water, fairly thick paint. This spring green, little bit of viridian green, and then define some of those bushes there. So got a row of bushes coming down the left-hand side, and they sort of level out as they come down to the rocky outcrop, and then they are go a bit steeper up to the building. There's some more shrubs here, and in fact there's a row of shrubs just below the castle wall there. Then there's a row of dark shrubs just in there. On the right-hand side of the island, just below the tall building. Okay, smaller brush, smaller synthetic brush, not too much water on the brush, almost just pure pigment. I'll define some of the details on the castle buildings just a little bit more. So the bottom edge of the roof there, a few little windows, and coming over to the connecting bit. Right hand side of the castle, there's two windows which stand out. One there, one there. Don't put too much detail into the building, I would say, but just enough to sort of give the impression of that castle and the weathering, this weathering on the side of the building. Not too much detail, not too many hard edges. Getting some arches now on that bridge. Well, I've got this brush here, a good brush to do those arches with. And there's one here. One there. Hard edge of the top, dark hard edge of the top of the arch. and then the next one along. The tops of the arches are level. So very dark at the top, and then a little bit lighter as we come down to the bottom. Back to my flat brush. Now define a little bit more detail to these rocks. And the levels of these. The levels of the different textures and rocks and vegetation that we've got over there. To create more of a contrast between the light rock there and the water beyond, just again with this flat brush, just going with a little bit of dark paint there just to define that a bit more, that edge a bit more. That's that rock there. I think with I need to, this water here between the island and the foreshore, I need to just add in a few more horizontal lines, just to add a bit more texture into that area. So it doesn't really matter what colour I've got here, the value is more important. So something a little bit darker than what I've done originally. Into the gap between the two, between the island and the shore. Try not to overwork this, try and keep it fairly fresh. Okay. Next, I think I'm about 80–90% done, I reckon. Let me just see if there's any questions. So Niels is asking, the distant hill, will that be the final value? Yes, it will. You've got to be very careful. You could define some of the trees here a little bit more with, well, maybe a little bit of a flat brush. You could do this. says he. I really don't want to do this, but just to sort of describe what I might do. So these lighter areas here, you could emphasize them by making them stand out a bit more as a tree. So I could go around it and just with a flat brush or some brush with a flat edge, just define that. So you get a hard edge and a soft edge just to define that. There's another one there. That could be another tree there. So right hand side of the tree, top of the tree, and left hand side of the tree. Something like that. There's maybe, we just see, maybe there's another one there. Do you see what I mean? So you're sort of adding a little bit of texture, a bit more interest to the far side there. Neil's all right. We just, oh, yeah, Mark, yeah, lifted out already. Yeah, thanks very much. All right then. I'm going to now concentrate on the foreground area, and I need this to be dry. I'm just going to use my hairdryer again. Please excuse me. What I'm going to do here is use my flat brush again to add in some dry brush marks for the crusty top of these rocks here. And then I was thinking about using a rigger brush, quite well loaded with really dark paint, and then create these little cracks in the rock. All right, trying to get some character there. This sort of, I think it's granite, this rock here. Trying to create those cracks. But with these marks, again, I'm going to be trying to, the angle of them, try and gently move the viewer up towards the castle. Right, brush. Make sure this brush is clean. And so I've got a big pot of clear water to my side, and not too much water on the brush. I want a fairly dry mixture. A little bit of white gouache, a little bit of this Naples yellow light. So it's not sort of pure white. And then it could be a bit whiter. And I've got a fairly rough texture of paper. This might be more effective if you do have rough paper. And then just starting at the top, dragging down from the top edge of that rock, these sort of dry brush marks. All right, trying to create this sort of crusty top. Right, there's a little bit of a point there. Let's just emphasize that a bit more. Bit of that white, bit of this Naples yellow light. You could add a bit of a tiny bit of yellow ochre, I guess, just to take the edge off that white. There's a little bit of white also down in the gaps here. I really don't know what this sort of stuff is, but it adds a nice sort of dimension to the painting. Of course, gouache will dry a little bit lighter, so you've got to sort of emphasize that and compensate with going in a bit lighter. Nearly there. Let's just do this rock here. Just while I've got this brush, might just emphasize a little bit of the architectural details up there. These lines and some of the lightness on the rocks on the far side as well. There we are. And let's get in now with a rigger brush some lighter green. Really do have quite a mixture of different seaweeds on this little stretch here. I'm always picking up pure pigment here, that spring green. There we go. Nearly there. Let's get in some of these cracks. Right, again, a little bit of observation is needed to just observe, just to sort of study how these cracks, their directions and so on. Now, with my rigger brush, something really dark. And is this dry? Yes, it is. So a good edge to the brush and just make a few of these lines here to denote some of the cracks. In fact, like I was showing you over here, where you see lighter bits, you can go around them with this. Right, there's a lighter area there. So go around those, defining some cracks, just to emphasize that. That lighter area. I'll just take a few minutes doing this. It's quite laborious for you to watch this. But just not put too many dark cracks in the top there. I want to try and preserve that lighter top to it. Now I'm creating some of these bigger patches of seaweed. A bit more water on the brush. Not too much detail around the side. We want the main emphasis being around the middle area. Right, just a few over here on this rock, and then we're almost done. They might need a bit darker underneath some of these shrubs on the far side. Not too dark, of course. I think we're nearly done, says he. Just emphasize some key little areas here. Here we go. I could put some birds in the sky or something like that. Let's just double check the buildings. That looks all right. Right, far side buildings. There's no aerials as such. There's a few little chimney pots, so there might be an aerial there. I think the buildings are inhabited by a Scottish family there, who traced their ancestry back to many hundred years ago. Great. So building, island, shrubs, rocky base to the island, transitioning into the seaweed. Transitioning into the seaweed. Let's just picking up a bit of this green and alizarin crimson. That my brush is contaminated with that white. Really must watch the cleanliness of your brushes when you're just using one brush like I am. Phrygian green, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and just pick up some of the spring green again. A little bit of green in the top of that rock. There we are. The trick, of course, is knowing when to stop. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one, and I will catch up with you very soon on the next demo. So thanks very much for watching. Now, those of you on the relevant tier on Patreon will, of course, get to send me their painting for my critique. And please wait for a posting on Patreon where I'll describe the full process for you. But if anyone's got any final questions, oh, Ronald has asked, no stairway, no stairway, no stairway. Is that the stairway there? If you mean there, Ronald, for me, that's too much detail. Bar means you could put it in. Might work with liner wash if you're doing more of a detailed liner wash like that. I could put in a few more lines in here. Just to break up that white space there. Right. White on left water. Melissa, white on left water. Do you mean the buildings or the yacht? I'm not sure there. Sorry, Melissa. All right, let me just see if there's any final chat messages. Okay. Right, well, let me gradually bring things to a close here. So just to summarize, the Eilean Dunnan castle in Scotland. An exercise in depth, pushing those hills back. Hopefully we've kind of got that a little bit more in the photo. To me, the photo almost looks like they're joined together. The values are the same. Emphasizing the contrast there. Look how dark that is against the sky. A little bit, pushing it a little bit more beyond the values we got there. Introduce lots of colors in that castle. Don't make it too boring. Capture those stains, the windows, the architectural details. There's warms in there, there's cools in there. And then, well, quite complicated in this area, but just decompose it, just break it down into its components. Just think about this rocky outcrop there, and that one there, and then these sort of horizontal bits of seaweed and a little bit of water coming into this gap between the island and the foreground, keeping the bridge fairly simple. So over there on the right hand side, not too much detail. There are figures in here. I haven't bothered to put them in. They're just too far away, all right, for this particular scene. Well, thanks very much, all of you, those that have been patient enough to sit through this watching live. I do appreciate that. And so please bear with me, wait about 24 hours or so, and I will put a full posting up on Patreon with a YouTube version of this. All right, I know some of you might prefer a YouTube format, and full details for those of you on a critique, a video critique level. But thanks very much. I wish you a pleasant rest of your day and a nice weekend, and I'll catch up with you very soon.